Kלים Perek Tesvav, Mishnah Vav. Now we're into one of my long ones. A lot to say on this Mishnah, so bear with me and relax. Says the Mishnah, Nivle Hashara Tamein, V'Nivle B'nei Levi Tahirin. We're dealing now with, again, musical instruments. A nevel. A nevel is a machlokas, what sort of instrument a nevel is. It's either some sort of wind instrument, you blow into it, or it's some sort of drum, percussion instrument. But it seems to most people that it's actually the one we expect it to be. It's a stringed instrument. That's why we find in the Tilim, nevel osir. A nevel is an instrument with 10 strings. Halul b'nevel v'chinor. It's like a kinnor. It's a type of stringed instrument. Says the Mishnah. The general one is Tomei. V'nivnei b'nei Levi Tahirin, the one used in the Beis HaMikdash by the Leviim, is Tahir. Bartanur explains that these instruments are made out of wood, and they're also a kli kibbul, because when the people play instruments and they busk means they sit in the street and collect money, then they put the money inside the keli, so it's got a kli kibbul, it's also the kibbul, and therefore it's tomei. However, the one in the Beis HaMikdash, of course, the Levim, didn't collect money, and therefore, although it's got a kibbul, it's not also the kibbul, and therefore is not tomei. And because the Mishnah has now made the distinction between kelim in normal domestic use outside the Beis HaMikdash and those in the Beis HaMikdash, the Mishnah is now going to go to other dinim where we have a difference with things outside the Beis HaMikdash and things in. The Mishnah is carrying on. This is now nothing to do with kelim. This is very, very important rules generally about tumas mashkin. Kol mashkin tumein. Mashkin is actually quite a complicated sugya in the Gemara in Psachim. And there's a three-way machloka between Rabbi Loza, Reb Meir, and Rabbi Yossi. The bottom line is we paskin like Reb Meir, which means Reb Meir holds that mashkin are makabel tumah min hatayra, but they're not able to be metamei other oichel and mashkin min hatayra. They can only do that midrabanan. That's how we paskin. So when the Mishnah says kol mashkin tmein, it means to be makabel tumah min hatayra, to be metamei midrabanan. Which mashke are we talking? What's a mashke? Again, we passed the Rambam's shitta is that the mashkin, when we say the rules that mashkin are makabel tumah and are able to be metamei, it's only if they are the zayin mashkin, which is yayin, mayim, and tal, cholov, dam, and dvash. Forgotten the last one. Yain. Sorry. Switch it there a second. Okay, the 7 mashkin are. Bartanur lists them: mayim, yain, shemen, which is olive oil, dvash, bees honey, cholov, milk, dam, and tal. Only those mashkin are able to be makabel tumah and to pass tumah midrabanan. These same mashkin are also not only able to be makabel tumah, be metame, they can also be machshir. An oichel can only be makabel tumah if one of these 7 mashkin touch it. It must be these 7 and no others. Says the Mishnah, mashke beis mitbochaya tahirin. Again, this is a complicated sugya, but the upshot is the maskana of the sugya, and this is the way the Rambam paskins, that this is a din min ha-Torah. Halacha l'Moshe Misina is that if those mashkin come from the kitchens of the Beis HaMikdash, for instance, the blood which comes from shechting a korban, or the water used for washing the meat of the korbanos, any mashke which is in the Beis HaMikdash is tahir completely. They're not able to be makabel tumah, certainly therefore not able to be metame, and they cannot even be machshir. And then the Mishnah is going to move on to a different din. Kalas forim metamen es yadayim. We're now entering another massive sukkah about tumas yadayim. By way of introduction here, there are a few different gezeiras. Gezeira number 1 is the Chachamim instituted the gezeira that Sifrei Kodesh, the books of Tanakh written on parchment, Torah Nevi'im Ksuvim, or Tefillin and Mezuzahs, have a din of Sheni the Tumah. If they touch Truma, they make the Truma apostle, they turn the Truma into a Shlishi the Tumah. They did this Gezerah because they didn't want people used to regularly, had to protect their Truma. Kohanim would want to make sure their Truma stay tar. So what they think themselves, right, where can I put this Truma, keep it safe? You know, I'll do it, I'll put it in the Aron Kodesh, nice and safe there. So they used to hide their Truma in the Aron Kodesh. And of course, the mice came to eat the Truma. Mice are not that able to distinguish between a Truma and a Sefer, and therefore they would eat the Truma and eat the Sforim. So in order to stop people putting their Truma in the Aron Kodesh, they said, you know what, Sifrei Kodesh are Metame Truma. They have a din of a Sheni, the Truma, and they can make the Truma into Shlishi. That's Gezerah number 1. We have another Gezerah Drabonon called Tumas Yadayim. The Chachamim instituted the concept. Normally when a person becomes Tomei, the whole of him becomes Tomei. You can't just have one part of your body becoming Tomei. Tumas Yadayim is a Tumah Drabonon where they said in certain circumstances, where it's a weak Tumah, only the Yadayim become Tomei. Of course, you matahar them with Netila or Tefila Sidayim. They said Stam Yadayim, which are Skonias Hain, you don't know where these hands have been, are able, have a din of Sheni, and are able to be Metame Truma. But we're not talking about Stam Yadayim. They also said that certain Tumas, which are Shenis, or Rishons, are able to be Metame the Yadayim only, and those Yadayim become a Sheni. And they said that Sifrei Kodesh, not only can they be Metame Truma direct, by turning the Truma into a Shlishi, where the Sefer is contact with the Truma, as a part of an extension of that Gezerah, they said the Sforim can also be Metame hands which touch them, to make them into a Sheni, so that the hands can then be Metame Truma into a Shlishi. The reason for this Gezerah is quite complicated. The Gemara actually starts off with the Gezerah Rabbi Parnoch. It was started off originally to stop people touching Sforim, called Orum, without, you're not allowed to touch the Sefer Torah with your bare hands. You've got to have a cloth in between. So they started this Tumah. And then they extended it to Truma, and they said this is really part of an extension of the original Gezerah, that Sforim were able to be Metame Truma. Because of the mice, they said Sforim can also be Metame hands to be Metame Truma under the same rule. It's actually, again, quite a complicated sugya, and I would recommend, if somebody wants to go into the sugya, to have a look at a Tshuva Noida B'Yehuda in Madura Kama, on Erechaim Ois Zayin. Very interesting, and also it affects halacha today of whether you can actually, if you want to have to touch klaf and sifrei kodesh, do you have to wash your hands first? And I would refer you to Simon Kuf Mem Zayin and Erechaim, especially in the opening Bia halacha there. But anyway, they made this gezerah that Sforim have the ability to be metame yadayim midrabanon. The hand becomes a sheni, so that if the hand were to touch Truma, the Truma would become a Shlishi. They said that rule applies to all Sforim, chutz misefer ho'azora, except for the Sefer of the Azora. And again, there's a lot of interesting perushim here as to what the Sefer Azora means. But before, this was some Sefer Torah in the Beis HaMikdash. The reason why this is now being taken out of the general rule of Sforim and Tamanes Yadayim, because if Sforim and Tamanes Yadayim is all part of the extension of the original rule, that people would keep Truma next to the Sforim, and the mice would attack the Truma and attack the Sforim, nobody would ever dare keep their Truma next to the Sefer Torah of the Beis HaMikdash. That was such a holy Sefer Torah in people's eyes, that you couldn't just stick your Truma in there. Therefore there's no chashash people would ever keep their Truma next to the Sefer Torah in the Beis HaMikdash, and therefore there was no reason to be geyser that the Sefer of the Beis HaMikdash should have any Tumah at all, and therefore it hasn't got any Tumah. This Sefer Azorah itself, there is a Girsa Sefer Ezra. Ezra Sefer wrote the Sefer Torah, which was the main Sefer Torah of the Beis HaMikdash. After Moshe Rabbeinu's original Sefer Torah was nignaz with the Oren, Ezra's Sefer Torah became the primary Sefer Torah of the land. And the Girsa we have is Sefer HaZorah, which again, this is a sugya in Bava Basra Daf Yudalad, when it seems this again was the main Sefer Torah of the Azorah, used by the Melech on Sukkot for the mitzvah of Hakel, and used every Yom Kippur by the Kohen Gadol to do his laning from. This holy Sefer Torah was one where people would not put truma there, therefore there was no tumah there at all. And we're going back now to our normal clay eights. Hamarkuf toher. A markuf, Baal Tanura tells us, was actually a wooden horse. It's like a shape, a head of a wooden horse with two handles, and the children would sit on it and jump up and down, pretending they're on a horse. So it's a kli eitz, she'eino beis kibble. Although we know the rule that something which you sit on like a chair is v'roy the mishka v'moishav is makabel tumah, but on these little wooden horses, they only pretended to ride. They didn't actually ride on them, put their body's weight on them, therefore they don't have a tumas medris either, therefore they're Torah completely. The Mishnah moves on to three other interesting kelim. Ha-bitnun v'ha-niktamoin v'ha-irus hare edu tameim. Bitnun from the word beten, from the word from the stomach. Baal Tanura tells us a big, large instrument which, when played, the person rested it on his stomach. Baal Tanura also tells us v'koileno balaz tzitra. There's an English word called a sitar. Baal Tanura, the Rambam actually has the word, says the word kitara, which is like some sort of giant, it was a guitar, big sort of guitar, or what they call a cello, which rested on the person. That's called a bitnoin. Niktamoin, again, there's a machlek as well. This is about Tanura tells us also it's a type of instrument which looked like a support on your leg, so you leaned on it. You actually leaned on it. The Gemara tells us in Shabbos that there's a few different perushim about an aniktamoin. Some say it was some sort of mask which the kids used to put over their face to scare people, or had a head of a donkey. It looked like you turned yourself into a donkey. There's other different pshatim. And the last one here is an irus. An irus is mentioned in the Sugya in Sotah of Mem Tes. The Gemara calls it a tavla de chadpuma, which is a type of tambourine. Again, this is a wooden rim with a skin stretched across. Then it was you banged on it, sort of a drum. These are all tameim. Now, really, this is difficult because why should they be tamei? They are a classic kli eitz emo based kibble. So the Mishnah Achrona says he thinks that the reason is because these instruments were actually used, like we had at the beginning of the Mishnah, they were actually used to put money in. When they collected money, they had a base kibble, and people actually put things in there. Rabbi Daim, he says, no, the Iris is more than that. Iris is not just the base kibble, it's also Tomei Moishav. We've had this before. When you have a pshutik le'etz, if however that pshutik le'etz, even though it has got no kibble at all, if it's made lemedris, that means it's made lemishkav or Moishav, as for instance the case of a chair, then a keli, which is ro'ui lemedris, is now not only able to be mekabel tumas medres, it's also mekabel all tumas under the rules. Once a keli is roy and medres, it is then mekabel tumah for all purposes, and it actually don't have to come on to any din of kibble or midrabanon. It's tamei moshav mipnei shach ilis yesheves alav. An ilis is the woman who wails at the levaya to Hesped. They play their instrument. They actually sit on this tambourine while they're banging on it. They also sit on it. And therefore it's royal in Mishka of a Moshev, and therefore it's Tomei under the rules of Medris as well. And the Perik finishes off with a little din about Mitsudas HaChulda Tamea V'Shalachborin Torah. This is again is a wooden little trap used to catch a chulda, catch a weasel, and achborin, catch mice. It has a kli kibble. The animal is trapped inside this mitsuda, and it's kept there. So it's a kli kibble. But as the Gaon explains, the difference between Mitzudas HaChulda and Mitzudas HaChborin is, in the case of the Chulda, the trapper actually wants the Chulda. Because the Chulda has a purpose for him, he actually uses the skin. Therefore it's a Kli Kibble and he wants the thing which is trapped inside. In the case of the mice, you don't actually want the mouse at all. In fact, you prefer the mice never came in the first place. If a mice gets there, it gets trapped. But you don't actually need the Kli to be makabel the mouse. You don't need the mouse, and therefore you just chuck it. As soon as you find the mouse, you chuck it. So therefore that's not called osu lekibble, and therefore such a mitzuda is tahira. Baruch Hashem, we finished Perik Tesvav, and I believe that makes us halfway through this giant.